Yeah, it's first or second parak of Yoma, one of the two. I can't
Yeah.
remember. Yeah.
Yeah, and they've instituted all kinds of rules to keep people out of the Kodesh.
Mhm.
So yeah, this is,
I'm interrupting. Isaac, could you send it out to the group?
Yeah.
Then I'll explain. I have something I'm saying. This is
Oh,
a
the
chiddush
chat-
that I'm sending out anything. It took Isaac, it took David Bogomoni, who's my assistant, it took Cheryl Robin, and a cast of many other characters just to get something out from me. So we'll get it there. So I'm saying in my mind, was I connected to anybody? And I found the connection. It wasn't that far off connection. And to this, one of the last to be buried, Donnie Morris. So his uncle's a rabbi in Southfield, Michigan. And I was as if, spent a lot of time in Southfield, a congregant of his. And I wrote him, said the little that I could say, and saying I only could say little. He's a very good rabbi, very good man. And he says, you can't imagine the pain. And he's a guy who's usually very, how could I say, modest, not like many rabbis who are verbose, very modest. So what can I tell you? So, Zecher Nishmatam. I should have asked others. Anybody connected to anyone? I'm sorry for not asking. I'm really sorry for not asking. It's the first thing I should ask. Okay. All right, so I have two.
But there's two kids from Montreal that I knew that passed away during the accident.
Yeah.
And
okay.
there's another fellow from France, which I don't know personally, but I have a lot of friends that are friends with them.
Yeah. Well, it reverberates. I mean, the reverberates. Okay. There's no good moving forward. So I want to tell you regarding, so Isaac, how is the group receiving this? We can tell them, because you sent it for me.
I sent an email to everyone in the Google group, and also I put the link in the chat.
Okay,
So all you have to do is
so you can
click on the
find it.
link.
If you can't find it, talk to Isaac. He'll tell you how to find it. So I have two things here, one or two comments before the comments. It's like a rabbi who's speaking who says, before I speak, let me say a few words, it's like same kind of thing, right? So the first is that I was thinking that this year, and increasingly in the past couple of years, we've done Yeridea. I'm trying to think. I've done it about 5 times or so. So I think Nachum is leading it this year, and the last time around, he was at least 50%. How many times, Nachum, have you been involved in this? 3 times? Hard to remember. Okay, I'll leave it.
Probably 4, but yeah, 3 or 4.
Okay,
I don't know.
so then maybe 5. But one thing to note is that I believe increasingly, maybe because the rabbis teaching or facilitating, in this case, facilitating and teaching, have gotten more competent. We've covered internally, Siman by Siman, much more material. I found notes of mine from the first time I did it, first 2 times, and per Siman didn't hit that many Sifim, just hit a few. So that's just a remark. One consistent thing is, I've always skipped Kachal. Did we always skip Kachal? We've always skipped Kachal.
I think you're right.
And I've always, and you putting it together, Nachum, you decided I should do Kachal. Thank you. No, I appreciate the comment. So and I'm not sure why. I have different reasons, but anyway, and the notion has always been, put the two together also, is not to necessarily teach everything that we're supposed to cover, but to be helpful for you to be covering all this material. And that's exactly, and probably should have said it much earlier, or I think I did say it, but maybe I should have said it better. You're responsible, and we try to be helpful. So that's my first kind of introductory remarks. Now on Kachal stuff, and I sent you Motzei Shabbos, very upset with everything that occurred. Anyway, I was doodling, and I decided to make occurred to me that there's just so many variables. Not such a hard topic per se, but there's a lot of variables in this topic, and the variables also sometimes are skewed in certain directions. So I started just writing down variables. Anyway, one thing led to the other. I sent this to Isaac, who made some very good corrections, and I made some corrections in your corrections. So, yeshkoyach to you. No, yeshkoyach. And I just want to talk about this for a moment in terms of how to help break down the material. So the actual topic here, I don't know if it came as what you received it. The actual topic here is tzadi mishtanim, which means variables. That's, I think, a modern Hebrew word. Or is there somebody else has a better word? Too late. I'm using the word mishtanim. Okay, no, you can. So variables. And I'm going to begin with us, because we're in the conversation, we're all in the conversation, to kind of review some of these groups of variables. And internally, I actually internally for each, try to, as much as possible, doing it the way I did it, to kind of group within the group of the variables. And I started with something that, and I won't bother you again, Isaac, but only to thank you, of the first variables in one, in which I didn't have it exactly this way, but the variables of Chatchila B'diavad, why not? And that is talked about over and over and over and over and over again, Chatchila B'diavad, and to consider them D'oraita, Divrei Sofrim, or D'Rabbanan, because the word Divrei Sofrim are always used. And I added the word asmachta as you see it, because I wonder what role does that asmachta play. The purpose of all this is not necessarily to get everything right, but just kind of start considering what we're dealing with. So if you talk about Chila B'diavad, and then you see D'oraita, etc., what is strange here? Yes, anybody? Just talk. Well, it must be too simple what I just asked. There is no D'oraitas, really. Correct me if correct, and all these things. Correct me. What's the regarding Kachal and regarding the conversation of Basar B'chalav and Kachal, and maybe I should have said Basar B'chalav on the top. Kachal, where is the D'oraita conversation? That's not a question. Okay, I don't get any answer because I don't think there's a D'oraita. Or Alexa, you have a D'oraita conversation? No? Okay, so fine. So we're talking really about something which is Divrei Sofrim D'Rabbanan. This is how I started thinking about it. And Divrei Sofrim, the term Divrei Sofrim is used often, of course, can be used often everywhere. But when Divrei Sofrim is used, how do you take it? That's the question. All right. When I see Divrei Sofrim, I see a very powerful D'Rabbanan. And in most cases, I think I'm right. It's a very powerful D'Rabbanan. Anybody just came on, Isaac sent you a chart and it's on the chat or somewhere. Let's talk about the asmachta for a minute, for a moment. What's the asmachta that's used here as it's used? Al tavashel gedi b'chalei v'imo. And it's a funny kind of term. I say the word asmachta, maybe I just said pasuk, because it functions as an asmachta, and at the same time, it functions as an asmachta. It gives us a powerful push for the divrei sofer. This is challah. When we're talking about basar v'chalav and kachal, we're talking about challah. If you want to get then technical about it, you should get technical, right? We use it for also in terms of an exclusionary principle of what doesn't count as a, if you take it seriously, a director. So what doesn't count? Joel, what doesn't count?
Chalav shchuta.
What?
Chalav shchuta doesn't count.
Yeah, our topic.
Yeah.
But it works really both ways. I mean, it's the pasuk that tells us don't cook meat and milk. And as for divrei sofrim and asmachta pushes that, but it's really an exclusionary thing at the same time, as if take it very seriously, then don't take it as seriously. Because it's really not the oraita. So as for creating this system of making the decision that kachal is something to be taken very seriously, you take it seriously, but up to a point, and you have the two psukim, you have the one pasuk going in two different directions. And that's the asmachta infuses the divrei sofrim, as it pretends to be a pasuk, but it's not a real pasuk. I mean, it's not a real pasuk for here, and therefore it excludes it at the same time. So that, I think, does something for us when we there's a lot of variables. And basically, I don't know if I hit all the variables on this page, if I hit all the variables. But basically, if you mix enough, as you can see, I have the Gidrei Bishul, Pulat Ha, Kriya, etc. If you put enough of a situation, you'll get enough of the stuff of the Shulchan Aruch, of the Gemara and the Shulchan Aruch, more or less. Let me try another thing. So I call this Gidrei Bishul. Klali, using the word Bishul is Klali. When I say Klali for Bishul, what does that mean? Klali for Bishul. It means Bishul and Sali, because Bishul is, they mix their terms. By Bishul, sometimes they mean, we talked about that a week ago, 2 weeks ago. Bishul either really means Sali, or Bishul is a manner of cooking, which refers to both. But the distinction between Bishul and Sali becomes very important in terms of the poskim. Bishul, the particular act of cooking in water, or the particular act of cooking on a high flame, becomes important and can become, at least for some Rishonim poskim, it becomes a definitive aspect of how you treat the situation. And then whether or not it's im basar acher or ba'atzmo. Logically, I should have put ba'atzmo, levad, with no other meat. First, I did im basar acher because my own, just so you understand how I did it, that generally I try to give the most severe cases first. So im basar acher is more, not arguing for it, I just did it that way. Im basar acher or ba'atzmo, levad, what does it mean for the bishul or for the sli? Just so that we talk a little bit and I hear something, okay? Why is im basar acher? What makes it a more severe case? I'm assuming it's a more severe case. What makes it a more severe case? as opposed to cooking levad, cooking ba'atzmo, levad, without anything else.
The milk inside it is closer to an Isser with other basar than it is with the basar. It's with the chal itself.
The other basar could very well be
It becomes
Well,
close.
closer. It mixes it up. It makes it more. It makes it. See, I'm just repeating myself, saying it's more severe, but not saying why. We'll see it in the postscript. But you know that we have this im basar char noam. What does im basar char do?
It
You don't know where-
Right. It elevates the conversation. There's a distinction between something that's internal and something that's external. And I think
by virtue of being external,
I think there's a highlight of like the nitinat tam component. I know we're dealing with we're doing basar b'chalav, so
yeah.
is not as active, and we're still in Derabanan land, so it's definitely not a Deoraita, but it feels different. I know you don't like feels, but it does qualitatively feel different when it's dealing with something in an external manner, where you are taking the milk, which doesn't have the status of milk, and mixing it there, as opposed to staying within the kachal.
Okay, that's helpful. I was trained in a family raised and trained in a family where a feeling is you stub your toe. That's a feeling. The rest of that is shtuyot. Anyway, explains a lot about me. Okay. Anybody, anything else to be said? Nothing yet. Okay. I call this pu'ulata kriya. Okay, little brisker thing in there. How does
I could add one. I could add one
Yeah.
thing. Maybe when the milk comes out of the, it's more like milk then. When you cooked it by itself, maybe it's just internally staying there and it's not really milk. But when it comes out, it seems like milk.
Good, great. That usually is
But
our
it's still-
definition of milk. We'll come back down later.
Right,
Seems
but
very
it's-
close to that. In fact, you have to argue why it's not milk.
Right, but it's still
By
going
milk,
to
I
be
mean regular milk.
well,
Thank
but
you,
it's
Rabbi.
still like a lesser type of milk, right? Because it's halab shechuta.
It's still what?
It's like a lesser type of milk.
Yeah.
It's like junior milk because it's halab shechuta, right? Which is only derabanan. It's not like
Yeah, sure it's the Rabbanan, but I'm just saying why it seems
Yeah.
worse.
Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, that's enough. Not trying to fix it completely, but to get our okay. So now I'm at Pulata Kriya. The functions or how Kriya actually works. So I didn't know how to start. I decided to go with the classic three. That seems to be in terms of the Gemara, seems to be the major. Kriya called Gimel Derachim. I just use that term. Shesi v'arev, right? Archo v'rachvo, excuse me. The tacho b'kotel, the pressing out. But I didn't put in here is also using a presser, which the Rishonim talk about, which would be the same thing. Or kriyat bet derachim, which is also considered pretty, well, I'm going to ask about it, which is shati, the arev, beli ticha, okay? Kriya ba'alma, kriya ksat, sometimes referred to. It's either the shati, the warp or the woof, or I'm asking pachot from that when they say kriya. And therefore they're going into the limit. Which one is the normal one? In other words, which one is kriya? All three are kriya. Which one is kriya? I'm still asking the question nonetheless. What's the argument for the first one, Kriyat Kol Gimel Derachim, being Kriya? Then we talk about Kriya it should be that one. What would be the argument for it? The logical argument for it?
That's the only way you get out all the milk.
So you get all the milk out. So that's why I would argue that Kriyat Bet Derachim is what's Kriya, and we see that quite often, because that's the normal assumption. If you go warp in the woof, you should get it off. But if you're worried, halacha is variously worried, or if you're a Baal halacha and you're worried, and you want to make sure you got all of them out, so you go for the 3, but I don't think that's the normal one. That's the you got a syndrome. You have a problem. And so you go that way. I offer that to you in terms of when the Gemara speaks. That's it. Or I could say it this way. Tachel b'kotel should be a way that might be normal for which case? Our case, kachal. Kachal has all those problems. Kachal, creates problems for us. All these absorption or getting rid of it is kind of quite hard. If you had smooth meat, you wouldn't necessarily be so upset with this. But the kachal seems to have this problem of creating gumot. And maybe therefore tacho is really dafka sui generis or specific to the case. Why am I doing this? As I say in between here, going through the variables with each other and see how the variables will be used. Then after that, I say, okay, no bishul, no kriya. You have bishul without kriya. That exists of getting rid of the milk. I should have called it something else. I guess pulata kriya, getting rid of milk. Maybe there's situations that you can. We have situations in the halacha. How about the case of harbei kriyot? And where would we put the harbei kriyot? Where would we put it on the chart? I put it down here because it's not normal. It's not always talked about, but then it's brought up by the Rishonim. What about harbei kriyot? You cut it up into a lot of pieces. If you cut it up to a lot of pieces, you're for sure going to get the milk out. So it's an extreme of kriya, the way I said it, kriyat called gibel derachim. You're so worried that it's even tachlu. I'm going to give you something that would for sure. Now, of course, sometimes when they talk about it, like, how does that work? Because it's not necessarily said as a normal thing, but yeah, if you're really worried about it, harbei kriyot. There's another question. Merikata chalav, getting the chalav out once you've done the kriya. Is it a totza'ah from the shefti va'arev cutting, the normal cutting, what I call the normal cutting, or is this some of the achronim here? You don't see this for sure. So the achronim said, or is this another thing you're supposed to do? It's not just a result. You do sheti va'arev, and you think like then everything falls out on its own. No. Make sure that you get it out. Take your hand or whatever, and make sure you get the rest out. So depending on the type of kriya or non-kriya that you have, or method of getting the milk out, which is basically a divrei sofrim drabanan based on a smachta, it's going to make a difference, at least here already. It'll make a difference in terms of how you pass it. Not done. Yeah, who's got? Yeah.
It's Joel. I just wanted to ask about that last thing that you brought up about the totzah getting the milk out, right? Is that claim essentially, is the goal to get the milk out, or is the goal just to cut the thing up, right? And that's what fixes it essentially, right? That's the question, is like, what's the fix actually?
Yeah, this is when I first saw it, I said, what about course is this? You just do the halacha and you're fine. But here it says, yeah, there's a goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a goal. And we were saying the goal. Was it the other thing, which is the equivalent in the achronim, is what, instead of you throw it against the wall, tacho, you use a presser. You get, or I guess you could use a rolling pin, or you have some sort of stamp press, and then you put it in there and you did, and all the milk. So also there, a lot of Achronim say, yeah, that's fine, that's good. Actually, it's better, a modern way, which is better than the old-fashioned way of throwing it against the wall. So it's not like I came up with it.
Yeah, the Shita of Harbe Kriot, which I think the Ramah has, right? Isn't that one automatically just assumes that the goal is to get the milk out, right? It's not about the Kriya itself.
So explain that to me. So therefore, what? Let me explain.
So in other words, like, why do Harbe Kriot if the whole point is to do Sheti Ve'erev and to press it, right? And that's like those are the steps to fix it. It's not it gets the milk out, but that's not the major concern in some ways. Then Harbe Kriot, why would you do that unless you actually think that the real goal is to get the milk out, and that you want to do the best job you can.
Okay, that's one way. That's really the one way of putting it. And where is getting the milk out so concerned? Because you've done enough with Shesi and Arek. Where's that tacho and all that? It's because it's this Divrei Sofrim paranoia, which doesn't end with throwing against. Because, maybe that wasn't good enough. Oh, in the old days, they knew how to throw it really hard. They knew how to do that. But these days we're so weak, they don't know how to do it. Yeah, whatever. So that, in other words, I like that. Let me move on. I have a term here I should probably talk about. I said Pula, so I thought of Chetzat Bosora Kachal. In that sense, like, what is it? What is its status? That's the word, status. What is its status? The basar of the chachal, what's its status on its own? I'll have to just attack people. Yavni, what's the status of the basar chachal? What is it?
Bsari. It's okay. I think.
It's okay. And now give me a bet. And I think you're okay too.
Thanks.
But what's the yeah, well, I think you're saying it, but there might be another way of saying it. Anybody else? Noam, you got something? You don't even know what I'm asking, right?
Mutar,
Maybe it's pleasure, because maybe it's pleasure.
Right. I guess if you take the kachal, the meat, and magically make the milk disappear, right? Then the kachal is fine. Is that what you're asking? The flesh is fine.
Well, there is a way of doing that. You go Shesi and Arev and throw it against the wall and put in your uncle's presser in his tailor shop, right? So what do you have then? Having
That's
done all that,
busser.
what do you have?
It's
What?
what you're saying. It's
meat.
just busser.
It's busser. Busser Malia. It's busser. So why am I hacking on this? Because the problem might be on the chalav side. And we're used to thinking of busser b'chalav and thinking this unique connection. And now I don't even know how to say it better. But busser on its own is busser. Now, what happens if you didn't do these three things? Is it still busser? Is it considered basar asura on its own? So maybe Drabanan is considered because we got a problem here. What I'm saying is the culprit is not the basar is a victim. The basar happens to be there. It's the milk interacting with the basar that has our problem. The function's really on what we should be concerned about the whole time is the basar, is the chalav. In fact, there are no, as far as I can tell, conversations about the basar itself, except for one, that the tom that it might have. But I think that's really our continuation of the conversation of chalav, and I'll take that as a segue. The segue is chefsas chalav, and then it goes to the second page. Chefsas chalav is basar chalav shachalav pirash ukenusa. And here the example that the Gemara talks about is keva. And what kind of chalav? What type of chalav is that? The chalav
Well, that
that
depends
comes
on
out,
who
gathers
you
together.
ask.
Our example is usually
As
keva.
in-
What do you got?
The keva depends who you ask, right? Like it's either like pirsha, so it's either like not chalav. It's either some of it's pirsha and some of it's chalav, or it's all chalav, depending on which sheet that you go by.
Okay, fine. So it's either a gurnit, or it could very well be a zach, right? And as a zach, it's chalav. It's real chalav. Kechal b'chalav sheperash. I already had that as an earlier form. Kechal u'mashin yishar b'gumiyot hachalav b'tocho. I don't know if I said it so well. What's the status of these gumiyot? That's a question. Status of gumiyot. Is that the right word? Gumiyot? I think so. Yeah. What's its status? Are they gumiyot of? Are they and if it has if the status of gumiyot is just a bunch of chalav nishchata, is there anything special about it? Why is it here? Why do they talk about it?
Well, we just have this idea that essentially, like, we think it's common that there will be some of the milk that remains in the gumot, like regardless, seemingly kind of going against what we were saying earlier, this idea that I could like really get rid of all the milk. There's this idea that like possibly there
Yeah.
actually might still be some milk that's left in these little gumot in the cup.
And then intellectually or emotionally, what do we have to do with it?
Like if I think that there actually is still milk in these gumot, then I should be treating this like some amount of isser.
Okay. And there's a recoiling. Or
Or the
you could
opposite,
say,
right?
the reality check, this exists.
I did Shetiv Erev, I did, Ticha, I'm done, right? And the Gumot, it's not a problem, so.
Right, like I think we do get that opinion. I forget like where I think maybe it's the Ramah or somebody else
Ramah, yeah.
relates it, where he's
Yes.
basically like, and even if you find some stuff there, like it's fine. Basically, like all of this stuff really isn't like Maker Hadin that much of a problem. And so like if you've been doing what you were supposed to and aren't just treating this like completely like I can like cook this with its milk, then if there's a little bit left, like who cares?
What about the lachuchita chalav shenishar? There's a dampness, a milk dampness. You say, okay, it's even less than the gumiyot. But the gumiyot still bothers people. Okay, and then kachal, when is it mevutal, when is it mevatel, when is it asur, when is it oser? That comes down to the question, when is it min haminyan, when is it not min haminyan, in the issue of beetle. Okay, this is the variables. And I think it'd be interesting for me if we hit any that we haven't mentioned. We probably have a few. By the way, any variable that you think we missed? We means me, but that I missed? Of Nachum, what did I miss? Not sure. Okay.
Did we talk about Bishul versus Tzeli? Maybe it was.
Yeah, that's at the
Yeah, we did
very
talk.
beginning.
Okay.
And,
Sorry.
right, and we should have thought about it. So talk about it. Bishul is, which in a sense is, well, which
Bishul
has
is
a
more of a
greater
problem.
impact?
Bishul
Which has a
b'kdera is
greater
more
impact?
of a problem.
Excuse me?
Bishul b'kdera is more of a problem than Tzeli.
Right, and that we've had all the way through, but just remind me, why is it more of a problem?
Because fluids stay in and get mixed up in a pot, whereas when you're grilling them or roasting them, they go away.
Maybe, right?
Well, right, I
They
mean,
may
that's
go
why
away.
like there's
It might
different
very well
questions.
go
Like in
away.
the pot, the question is about the thing itself or about if it's being cooked with other stuff or whatever. Whereas like the tzeli, it's about like if there's other meat that's being roasted at the same time, like it's positioned vis-a-vis this, and like yeah, right, like what we think about that. Because like the difference of the pot, it's like we think this will expel the milk, and then it's just in that milk, like it and whatever else is being cooked to that. Whereas like the chal itself while roasting is not going to then interact again with whatever milk it's expelling.
Okay. And Joel?
Just one variable is the kalim that you use, like the knife that you use to cut the kahal, is a variable that comes in too.
Okay, right, I don't have that there, right?
Another variable that doesn't come in much, but might have come in more, is whether whether the udders are like of a full full nursing
Full
animal
bursting, okay,
right,
a big
or-
amount. But what's the sheet to say that says they're all the same? Whether it's bursting or not?
I think most of them, I don't remember who originated.
Yeah, I
But as I
mean,
recall, that's
Chicha could be, well, it could be we really officially don't know how much is in there. You may feel it's bursting, but we don't, I mean, they don't say, okay. Beseder. Okay, so that's the first piece of what I wanted to do. Now, what I want to do is look at important Rashis. Well, I just said the answer to a different question. Who are the three Rishonim before we get to the Shulchan Aruch that we want to know?
Rashi,
Rabbeinu Tam.
Rambam. Or maybe, well,
And,
I was gonna say the Rambam. but you might mean
Rambam should
the
always be there, but not doing Rambam.
but I think you mean the Rif.
I mean the Rif. So therefore, what I want to look at, without doing the Gemara, I trust you on the Gemara, is kind of like look at what we can extract. We can be poresh from the Rashi, from Rabbeinu Tam, and from the Rif. And therefore, I want to go to three necessary Rashis. So you have your Chulin there, three necessary Rashis. The first necessary Rashi on Kuftat Amud Bet would be the first Rashi that we need to look at, which is, Amarav Eino Over Alav, right? What's the situation? Right, you have the basar, this kind of chalav. What's taking place? What's the definition? Rav tells us, ain't no over alav, no avera. So what does that mean? Ain't no over alav. So Josh, you see where it is in the Gemara? Do you have that Gemara?
No, can you give the reference again?
It's Kuftet Amud Bet, and let's see, Kuftet Amud Bet. And it's the first Rashi.
All right, it'll take me a second.
Kuftet Amud Bet, first Rashi.
אמר רב, אינו עובר עליו מדאורייתא, ומותר לכתחילה באכילה, אם בשלו, ולא אמרינן אסור. מיה מדרבנן,
So now what I want you to do with the Rashi is tell me what halachically, what halachic pointers or points made by Rashi without telling, what's the points made by Rashi? Halachically. I'm doing this because we have one session and I can't go through the Gemaras and how Rashi understands the Gemara. So I'm missing all that. You can have that. You should do that. But
There's someone else take it. It seems like he's saying when it says "Eino over alav," he's questioning whether that's lechatchila or b'diavad, and
well, the
I think you
overall love would probably just be the status of doing the act, okay? But also then he says zumuter, af lechatchila. Actually gives you the b'diavad, and then gives you a lechatchila. You can do this. What's the case we're talking about? Yes, Yavni?
Sorry, I was going to say, the only thing is that not that you can do this, but rather that that you can eat it if it's been done, but to do it is still maybe a problem d'Rabbanan.
Aha. Okay. So in terms of the achila, okay. And what's the argument of why it's mutter?
Because we've said that chalav shchuta, that you've milked from a dead cow, that's allowed d'oraita, and it's not allowed to eat or to cook with meat d'Rabbanan. And this, because this is even less similar to normal milk, because it hasn't even been milked out of the cow. It's
Well,
just sitting in the udder, and
Yeah.
therefore it is even. We don't even have any sort of d'Rabbanan on it.
So it gives us the contours of the Easter d'Rabbanan.
Right.
Doesn't
Kind
give
of
us
gives
everything,
us
but
like
it gives
the
us
in
the contours.
between. He kind of gives us like the intermediate like madriga here, because I feel like a lot of times what the Gemara is sort of hinting at is we often feel uncomfortable hopping from like this isn't usher d'oraita to like this is mutar. Like a lot of times like having like intermediate steps. So he's like, it's not usher d'oraita. And what would be usher d'Rabbanan is if this were like milk of like of a shchuta that had then left the animal's body, but this hasn't even done that, so it's actually mutar.
Right. So this gives us the limitation on saying that there's a drabanan. How far can the drabanan go? Well, it doesn't go this far. Havamina, you would think it would go this far. After all, the milk is there, but the milk, whatever is there is no problem. What's a madrega less than drabanan? Mutter. No Easter. Mutter. Okay, good. Second necessary, I have 4 necessary Rashis. On the same daf, Hakamashmalan. Right, this is Rebbe Elazar. What did Rebbe Elazar do? Anybody help me? What did he say? What did he do?
He said like tear this and make it for me.
He said to his shamas, prepare this and I'm going to eat it. And what therefore the action is? It's the action of Bishul. I'll do the Achila, you do the Bishul. Okay? It's a Chachila action. Fits into our categories. Okay, so Lexi, you read this. Rabbi Elazar Kriya Ba'amakom Arle.
Sorry, I have to pull it up for a sec. If somebody else wants to take this over.
Okay, Andre, are you with me?
Yes. Do you hear me? Yes.
Yes,
The
I hear
Rashi.
you dramatically. Go ahead.
Hi, Kamashmalan. Kriyat be'alma. Kamashmalan again?
Yeah.
או שתי או ערב, לפי שהחלב הנוטף יוצא למטה, ומשייצא והרי הוא חלב.
What causes it to go down?
It causes to go the chalav
If
to
it's
go
Leah,
down.
if it's Leah, just say it's Sully. So it's Sully, that's what it does. So it starts going down, okay?
והרי הוא חלב לא חזר ולא בא ישתה בערב, אלא לקדרה דהתם ודאי צריך להוציא כולו מתחילה. לפי כשהוא יוצא, הרי הוא חלב גמור, וחוזר ומתבשל עמו. ודקתני לעיל שבישלו מותר בצלי, כאמר, צלי נמי קרי בישול, דכתיב בדברי הימים, ויבשלו הפסח. So they're saying that you have to.
Did you finish the Rashi?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I was going slow. The Sli Nami Kari Bishul, you read that?
Yeah, it's Tzli Nami
Yeah,
Kari
I'm
Bishul.
sorry. Okay, very good. He's got a lot of points here, halachically. Rashi, he's working hard. First, as we said, the lechatchila of the shamas being during the kriya, and then the second point, which we didn't have before, is a very big reading of what line in the Gemara. I said I wasn't going to do this, but there is a line in the Gemara that's very important. A phrase, not a line, even. That's Kriya Bet. What's Kriya Bet? Shativ Arev, right? That's the two. We always had them together. But Rashi's reading it as the Vav, the conjunctive Vav, meaning either or. Which is a way that the Chazal often read Vavs in Pesukim. You don't have a pasuk here. We have but they're reading it as if they're reading a pasuk, reading what Chazal said. The Chazal said, reading what they themselves said. Oh, Shati Arev. So that's a category of Ktsat in terms of Kriya. If we're now doing subdivisions, we had Kriya of Gimel, which including Tacho, then we would have Kriya of Bet, in which case would be both, either or. Right, and it's it's a big category. But why does this work? It works because in the case of what happens in the case, what makes it work? Because in the case of the tzli, we notice that something happens. That the Easter milk flows downwards and is burnt up. And therefore, in the case of Sli, Rashi gives us the either or situation because that is sufficient for it to happen. Even though this is Chalav Shchuta, which is a Drabanan problem, is no problem. Except Shati, Rashi derives from here, Shati V'Arev is operable, meaning both together, as a Vav connective and both. In what situation?
Normal bishul.
Right, normal bishul. Regular bishul, right, I like it. Normal bishul, okay. In that case, you gotta get it all out. Because when it has left and goes back and has the ability of interpenetrating, choser mitpashelimo, you got to make sure that it's been cleaned out, and it has been cleaned out. It's choser mitpashelimo.
It's interesting that Rashi uses the phrase chalav gamor, but it's
He's
not.
a brisker. It's one of the proofs, by the way. It's a classic proof that he's like a brisker. Chalav Gomer. I'm sorry, but I interrupted you. It's funny because
it's not Chalav Gamor.
right.
No,
So that goes back to our
it's
situation.
Chalav Gamor in comparison to the situation that happens with Tzli, where it sort of just burns out, but it's not Chalav Gamor in relation to the Deoraita prohibition of
in
Lotiv Gedim.
in relationship to Chalav.
Right.
In relationship to Chalav. So, by the way, this is always a really kind of expression. So uses Chalav Gomer for something which is not Chalav. By the way, this is classic still in Jewish consciousness. I've never heard a Jew say about a non-Jew, he's a goy gomer. I've only heard Jews say this about another Jew. Him, you give him an aliyah, he's a goy gomer. About a goy, you don't say it because he's already a goy. It's an expression. So he says here, chalav gomer of our type, the chalav gomer of this drabanan divrei sofer gomer. Very good. Thank you for that. And thank you for that opportunity. And then the last point, of course, that he makes, what's the last point? Is the point that we know already, is that Sli is a term, is also covered under the term, or can use the term of Bishul. In other words, we have that, and we already have that in Psukim, and we have that, so they make the best of it, as opposed to being uncomfortable with it, make the best of it. So we have two dinim of Bishul, we have the din of Bishul, which is Bishul, and din of Bishul, which is Tzali. Okay, the third Rashi. That's also Kuf Tetel Bet. Nan Kor O Tanan Hula Kadera. So you have to make a decision about what Rashi says. And again, we're going for the halachas of Rashi and getting Rashi together. Joe, would you read that Rashi?
Sure. V'ha'anan korotnan hahulik dera, v'chi nafik mine, havi chalav shkuta, v'chi hadar umivlale asarle, urikatani lokro eno averalav, Rav Nachman sfirale kilishna batra de Rav, uvraita mokila betsali, dichtiv vayvashlu hapesach b'divrei amim. Right, so it's right that if you when the chalav comes out of it, even though it's chalav shkuta, when it gets reabsorbed, that's asur, at least the Rabbanan, right? And so when we said that if you rip it,
what do you mean Rabbanan? Asmachta, push it up. And we already heard that other Rashi. It's chalav gomer.
Yeah, I know that's the thing. Rashi is almost treating it as deoraita in some ways here. Right?
Yeah,
and it's like,
yeah.
He's got this whole thing where b'diavad even it's asur and potentially. I mean, it's like very interesting. So, but all the cases that where you don't need.
So why does he do this? Inquiring minds want to know, Rabbi. Why does he do this?
From me,
why is it? Yeah.
But I mean, it's a read of the Gemara, but I think he's forcing a little bit. I don't know. My sense is that because, well, here's my sense is that at the end of the day, right? What is chalav? It's something that came out of the kachal. And so chalav that comes out of the kachal is like I know you hate that word, but that's very close to chalav gamor, right?
Well, you just said something which I didn't think. This is, what can I say? Is that giving it whatever for the mind, for the experience of this, it cries out for a category. It can't just be, if you go Pirsha going all the way back, that's more simple. Of course, drinking Pirsha is a different thing than drinking this, because this evidently is probably good to drink and to cook in. But I think that's here. I think that's one understanding. And the second understanding, of course, I said they're creating a whole world of through an asmachta, drabanan, divrei sofer, but they're creating a whole world, and Rashi's helping them. He's doing the apologetics almost of how we have a How is it that we have a drabonin that's so powerful? So we talk about it. And by the way, a simple way of saying that is to say that Chazal place the categories, except for one, the categories of Dioraita on this issue of Kachal. There's one category that they didn't put. They have Isur Achila, Isur Bishul, Isur Achila, but no Isur Hana. That's actually very important. And by doing that, that is a heker. We used that term a couple weeks ago. That's a heker for us to know, yes, it's like Deraisa. We're going to talk about Deraisa. Isn't it Deraisa? No, there's no Isur Hana. And that gives us but it's a segmented Isur. I mean, it's a segmented heker because all they talk about here is Bishul and Achila, and they don't talk, like it doesn't come up, but it's there. Okay, that was the third Rashi, unless somebody has another comment on that. Now, let's go to Kuf Yud Aleph. I didn't look up. Anybody have a comment on what we just did? Okay, so Kuf Yud Aleph, my fourth Rashi, necessary Rashi, my category, fourth necessary Rashi. When you chazer, you say, one of the necessary Rashis.
Kuf Yud Aleph, Amud Aleph, or Amud Bet?
It's Amud Bet. And this is kind of like after most of the discussion of Kaved, the liver discussions, which he, and I have to find it again. I lost it myself. I said Kuf Yud Aleph on the base. Yeah, it's in the middle of the Rashi that starts Kafei, Kufei Yud. So in the Vilna, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, from the top 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and it goes down in about 15 lines or 14 lines down from the top of the page. It's the Hilchot Kachal Kavar Lamadna. He's doing his own Chazorah right now, Rashi, which is very precious when he does a Chazorah, because then you see how he's been holding. The Hilchot Kachal Kavar Lamadnu Lamala, Rashi says. Okay, so let's see. Yavni, do you have that?
I'm looking for it on the page. Could you say again, what's the Dibur?
Kuf Yud Aleph Amud Bet. It's not that far from the top of the page, but it doesn't start there. It's in the big Rashi, which is Dama de Bisra Shekain. All the comparison with Dam, I don't want to get into that.
Sorry. Oh, found it. Okay. והלכות כחל כבר למדנו למעלה, לצלי באי קריאה שתי וערב, ואם לא קראו מותר כלישנא קמא דרב, דהה תניא קבתי ולקדרה קוראו שתי וערב ותוכו בכותל.
Okay, very good. So what's going on here?
So his summary is that if you're roasting it, you need to cut it both ways, and if you didn't, then it's still allowed. You are still allowed to eat it. And for cooking it in a pot, you not only need to cut it both ways, you also need to smash it against the wall.
Right. So what's important here?
Well, I have a note here, which is probably the text should probably be corrected to Sheti Orev, because that is more consistent with
so the confirmation, right? We have that confirmation. So that was number one. Yeah. So
Nice.
for one, thank you for that. And what else tells us? It tells us who we paskin like with Rav. There's two Lashonos of Rav. Which Lashon are we taking? First lashon. What does the first lashon
Oh.
say? That b'diavad
B'diavad it's mutar.
is mutter. Let's just make a comment now. What does it mean to say l'chatchila, you're supposed to do such and such, and they don't use even in a sense use the word chat. Oh, they use, well, it doesn't say the word l'chatchila. Kriya is the two kriya, double kriya, which I'm calling the normal kriya or the regular kriya, which is a fine kriya.
Well, not
And
according to the
therefore,
direction.
if he didn't do it, so like, we say this, there's going to be so many places where we say this over and over. What does it mean? You know, usually the chachil b'diavad, often we think of it in terms of mitzvahs that we do, positive mitzvahs. Not always. Here's the opposite. L'chadchila, we should do such and such, but b'diavad, okay. Or l'chadchila, here we make a mistake, but b'diavad, such and such. But in this case, l'chadchila, the l'chadchila, this is what I want to say. The l'chadchilas follow as if it's real milk. And the b'diavad brings us back to reality that it's a Iser d'Rabbanan, divrei sofrim, even divrei sofrim, but that's all it is.
Although maybe not with.
And I think once you have that, at least for me, once I had that kind of in my mind, just the sugya guy a little bit, it became interesting. I mean, not interesting, became easier, a little bit easier for me. You have a chadchila because we're moving towards that imposition. But on the other hand, it's an imposition the rabbis had treated like regular milk. And then the b'diavad says, well, the rabbis still know, or we have to concede, or even the rabbis have to concede that this is really not real milk. And that's kind of like how this works here. But one of the ways that it works here, I think, is that they try to have their cake and eat it too. To al-chadchila as if it's real milk, and then b'diavad, okay. Don't, congregant comes to you and tells you a story, don't get so upset, I'm gonna let you eat it. You know, you made a mistake, don't do it anymore.
Well, but it's stronger than I'm gonna let you eat it. It's you can eat it. Meaning when you say I'm gonna let you eat it, it already seems like you're
right. You're right. So good. That's a good correction. But what it doesn't mean is do it next week. You do say don't do this next week. Next Friday, leave me alone. Okay, so we'll take a break here. I want to do a few at least look at one or two necessary Tosfot, a necessary riff. I want to sum up the three of them. The three. Let's see what we can accomplish. 5 minutes from now, okay? Thank you.